Hello and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Wednesday, the 15th of April. I'm your host Daniel, and today we're going to talk about the US has shut down Iran's maritime trade despite optimism for more talks. Russian-linked hackers have compromised lots of Ukrainian prosecutor email accounts, and Ukraine could double arms production if provided with more funds, says Zelensky. So firstly, the United States said on Wednesday that its military had completely halted trade going in and out of Iran by sea, even though President Donald Trump said talks with Tehran on ending the war could resume this week. Trump said the negotiations between US and Iranian officials could resume in Pakistan in the next 2 days, and that Vice President J.D. Vance, who led weekend talks that ended without a breakthrough, said he felt positive about where things stood. So what? It's likely that this will further strain the Iranian economy, closing off their maritime trade, but it's likely to take some time. Some estimates I read this morning put it at like 10 to 14 days until Iran can no longer pull oil out of the ground and put it into reservoir tanks. Once you turn off oil pumping facilities, starting them again is a lot harder and it's quite costly. So this is kind of a key time frame I think the US are looking at for applying pressure to Iran. But some massive questions remain around the enforcement of this blockade, particularly around what are they going to do about Chinese ships. About 30% of the oil that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz goes directly to China, and it's unclear whether the US intends to stop Chinese vessels that have paid the toll to Iran, which is essentially what they said, but doing so could have some massive geopolitical repercussions, particularly around if China gets annoyed and sends naval ships to escort their oil tankers. Would the US stop a Chinese oil tanker? Would they stop the Chinese Navy? These are questions that remain kind of untested and unseen. It seems unlikely, but it could be a massive escalation. And yeah, as I just discussed, it could lead to some significant escalation. As Iran becomes more desperate, it's possible they might start firing missiles and drones at GCC targets again, or against US naval vessels, or against tankers that are sitting in the Gulf. As they become more desperate, things are going to escalate, most likely. And next, Russian-linked hackers broke into more than 170 email accounts belonging to prosecutors and investigators across Ukraine during the last several months, according to data reviewed by Reuters, a campaign that shows how Moscow spies are keeping tabs on Ukrainian officials tasked with rooting out corruption and Russian collaborators. The data was inadvertently exposed by internet hackers and discovered by Control-Alt-Intel, a collective of British and American cyber threat researchers. They said that the data was left on a server, including logs of successful hacking operations, and thousands of stolen email addresses showed that hackers had compromised at least 284 inboxes between September 24 and March 2026. So what? This hack that has now been uncovered is likely a huge source of intelligence for Russia. Understanding who Ukraine is looking at and going after within Ukraine gives them a great amount of resource. It's possibly allowed them to evade detection within Ukraine, able to hide or stop using agents or assets at certain times if they are under investigation and they become aware of it. It's also likely they could have used it for their information warfare. If they know that Ukrainian officials are going after a particular individual who is not a Russian asset or not useful to them anymore, they could use some information warfare techniques to either push Ukraine towards them to try and sow chaos within the country, or, if they want to keep them safe, try and move them away, stop contact, or get them to go quiet for a while. There's some massive repercussions there of how they could have used it. And lastly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Ukraine has the capacity to double its own domestic arms production if it was provided with further funding. Ukraine already produces most of its own weapons in its fight against the ongoing Russian invasion, but Zelensky noted in Berlin on Tuesday that production could be doubled if Ukraine had sufficient funds. In a statement at a press conference with Friedrich Merz, he said the majority of weapons Ukraine uses for various operations, from strikes against targets in the hinterland and fighting on the front line to air defense, and are now manufactured in Ukraine. However, he noted that we simply do not have the money, but we discussed some things around this today. So what? Boosting Ukrainian arms manufacturing could have both short and long-term consequences for the country. In the short term, making them more self-sufficient could make them more effective against Russia and less reliant on European stockpiles, which is good for both Europe and Ukraine. A strong Europe also helps Ukraine in the long term. And then in the long term, supporting their economy post-war. It's possible, it seems more and more likely, to be honest, that it will turn them into a military powerhouse going forward. Both their tactics, techniques, and procedures around drone warfare is going to become invaluable in the future, but also designing and testing these weapons. They are currently making some of the top-line drones that, they're tested on the battlefield against one of the most effective enemies. So, it's good to see. But yeah, I think it's good for Ukraine in the long term. But anyway, that's been your Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel. Make sure you give it a like, subscribe, and support the podcast. Thank you. See you.